Hello, everybody, and welcome to Dr. Deep State. This video is entitled The Magic Bullet Theory, Trump, and it's actually my second take. I had one recorded and posted. I said something inappropriate in the video, so I'm doing it again. So what I want to weigh in here, this channel's called Dr. Deep State, so I go into things pretty deeply. That's kind of the idea. So let me just sum things up. I'm saying with the events that are going on here, I think it's important to back off and look at this in a more historical perspective. And I'm going to throw it in the perspective of my channel, my two books, Seeing Through the Singularity and In Pursuit of the Metaverse. I'll leave a link down below. And what I'm going to do is give you a first take right here of what I think is going on. And then I have another video waiting over on the local station, and I've left the link for that as well. So I think right now the way I'm going to situate the second video, if this were a court of law, if it's a criminal trial beyond a reasonable doubt, what's going on does not reach that level, that beyond a reasonable doubt, this is a completely organic event, and we're just seeing things as they played out. The idea that this was in some ways manufactured is much more likely, but there's levels to how this was manufactured and multiple viewpoints on this. And I'm going to take one of the more edgy kind of viewpoints. There's the kind of the television view, the alternative media view, and I'm going to take it to the next level. And I've noticed I don't do this that often. I don't weigh in on the events so much. I watch them, I think about them, and I'll just throw out, I did in the first video, because it's usually a little far out there, especially if you're new to this stuff. So this channel right here is arguing overall, like the books, that we are engaged right now in a war over reality itself. And that I argue, and part of the idea of the channel here is we look at the traditional Catholic social order as really epitomizing reality. It's a whole philosophical, theological argument that's in my books. And that the world is moving us toward these sort of oligarchical structures are moving us toward an anti-reality or a simulation of reality. So I think this event fits into that. Now, how does it fit into it? I think it's a very high-level event. We're dealing with something in this age of 5G warfare, 6G warfare, and even 7G warfare is upon us, deep fakes, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. When we think about these in line of events that have happened over the last 25 years, it fits a pattern. So before I go on, when I did the channel Dr. Deep State, the reason I say Dr. Deep State, Dr. Haugen, is because I felt like I was academically prepared to take on this idea. I have Ivy League training. I got a doctorate. My specialty is international relations and security, i.e. deep state stuff that I literally did at a scholarly level, focused on empire, the rise of it, and the maintenance of it through all means necessary, strategic, psychological, etc. And so I've been doing this part along here. The really deep stuff, the mystical aspect, I've been at it for 12 years, and I had that all figured out before I started the channel. And I don't like sitting there talking about myself like this. But I do want you to bear in mind, that doesn't mean everybody with a lot of degrees is going to see things. I'm just saying because the people that type to do this, it's easy to write them off, especially in the past, this kind of explanation that's a little out there if you've never heard about it. But the way this event's structured, what I am seeing is it's very high level, and it has a purpose to it that I fit into the larger purpose of this narrative of where the direction of history is going toward this type of anti-reality. Gosh, without any further ado, what I'm going to do is throw in a video from almost 7 years ago. I would be tempted to each few 10, 20 seconds to stop and just remind you of how this fits in to the channel, to the books, to what's going on today with the events in the world. But ultimately, what I'm going to suggest to you, it's not dangerous to stand back. That's why in a courtroom, we have all the evidence presented, juries stand back and deliberate. So we remove the passions and we give time to kind of think about it. So it's whenever there's bang bang events with younger people or people casualties. People don't like to come in right away and kind of question it. It's kind of like taboo. So I think we're getting into an age right now where we kind of have to do it, because I think what's forming here's a mass formation type of movement, psychosis, if you like. The mimetic power is being framed, and it's being framed to take us in a different direction. So just standing back and just kind of thinking about this, I think the preponderance of evidence is pointing that this is kind of a very well thought through and put up there on a stage kind of event. And I'm going to be breaking it down a little bit more over there on locals and in the future. But I just wanted to kind of get in, because that's what I really want to have people kind of avoid what I'm calling is the simulacrum. It's this idea that the kind of information that we get from the world, from the prince of the air in this time of the great deception, is trying to kind of get us into a thinking of East versus West, Labor versus Tory, red versus blue. And it's very hard for people to remove them when an event is literally happening on a stage. All the archetypes in our mind kind of go into a moment where it's true, it's not true, very kayfabe, and a lot of chaos and a lot of magic, I think, with that bullet are going on. So let me pull this up for you, and I'll try to be quiet for the next 10 minutes, and then we'll rehash it at the end. Hello, and welcome back to Dr. Deep State. I'm going to begin a soft close for the course. So I'm going to be tidying up from last time and then introduce the conclusion to the course, Esoteric Biopolitics and the New World Order. So what we talked about over the last series was the pornification of Western culture. And we traced much of this back to a tradition within Kabbalistic Talmudic Judaism, and especially the Sabbatean strain that was part of this larger Venetian oligarchical history and structure and their operation. And the conclusion that we found was pretty shocking when you think about it, that the goal was to bring about a Messiah. And it's probably hard for some people to get their heads around that, especially if we tend to have a materialistic or naturalistic outlook upon the world. But if you let yourself go there for a moment, and we think about the manufacturing of prophecy, especially the prophecies of Isaiah, Ezekiel, and Jeremiah, with an emphasis Ezekiel 38 and 39, that we see very much that is what's going on in the world today. People have, in order for the Messiah to come, been systematically over the last several centuries degraded in order to bring about a world where everybody is complicit in this evil enterprise. And I'm going to elaborate on that a bit. But when we see the events going on the ground today, whether in Syria or Iran, it's mind-boggling to think that people are literally manufacturing biblical and Talmudic prophecy to bring around this apocalyptic depopulation of the world. And so within the Talmud, it's rather shocking when it goes into its concepts of population control in relationship to the new Messiah. This is where I want to go with this right now. I am going to use um, something I pulled from Henry Mako this week. And he's going to give us, we explained the first level of the chessboard and the second level when we're waking up to that, in fact, there is a New World Order that its last iteration probably begins with Francis Bacon in the Elizabethan era, and that it's being rolled out and its pace is increasing each day. And I want to use some of his words to describe what we talked about in the video called the Magick Bullet theory. And I, um, I said, what happens to the mind, the soul, and our being collectively and individually when we see these disparate ideas, and we know that to truly look at the truth will um, socially disable us. And we're put in that predicament all the time. And I called it a method of Kabbalistic control. So I want to read a little bit from Henry Makow this week. Um, he begins, they want your soul. That's why they're so sloppy. Anyone can see that no planes hit the Pentagon or crashed at Shanksville. They want us to compromise ourselves by accepting these lies and not seeking justice for the victims. Thus, by our passivity and cowardice, morally, we become their accomplices, practically collaborators. And one of his commenters weighed in. How can anybody fall for this hoax? I think he's referring to the latest phase of psyops that we've been seeing. Is the US a nation of rubes? It requires the suspension of reason because it isn't believable to a reasoning and rational human being. That's assuming anybody bothered to hit a click button and investigate any of this. One has to participate. And this is what biopolitics is about. And this is where it comes into play in explaining what's going on in the world today. One has to participate in their own deception in order to believe it. Again, the grand initiation, grand Kabbalistic initiation. I think that may be what they want. And again, what we've stressed throughout here is I'm making the connection between oligarchy, the true mode of control in the world, and their mode of operation is biopolitics, and making that connection so we can see that real politics today is not about some fictitious left or right paradigm, but it's control over bodies, biopolitical control over human bodies. And then once we know that, we can think about if we choose to comply with that or we choose to resist that control. By conjuring up these events that are unbelievable to a rational and reasoning person, they force us to participate in the lie and our own destruction. The hardest thing in the world right now is staying true to yourself and not deceiving yourself. And this is why I am doing this, Dr. Deep State. That's the way I see it. They need us to be active and lifelong participants in this massive lie. If we can continually suspend our reason and deceive ourselves, we control and police ourselves for them. That's biopolitics. That's why I bring Foucault and Italian and French, etc., thinkers into the equation. We internalize it. We become our own police for them. They enroll us into their project. We are our own slaves. The hardest thing right now is just staying conscious to this all and remain sane.
It would be so easy to just let go and allow the currents of change, and this would carry the mind and soul away. Mako continues. They don't want your children, your spouse, your property. That's all the second level of the chessboard stuff. They want the third level. They want your soul. They tell us about the conspiracy because they want us to be compromised. Just as lower ranked Freemasons or ordinary Jews or Americans or Europeans are compromised by their support for the war or their unwillingness to examine it in any meaningful way. They want us all to become demons. They are deliberately clumsy because they want our complicity. They don't want us to say, gee, we didn't know. They have a wager with God. They can win us over to Lucifer, but they have to give us free will, the ability to make a choice. And again, that's why I'm doing Dr. Deep State, because if you have free will, it's helpful to have all of the information available. And thus, why it's helpful for us to look at oligarchy and their mode of operation, biopolitics, and the bigger project at hand. They have a wager with God, as we said. That's the reason they reveal the conspiracy to us. For example, the Rockefellers sponsored the John Birch Society, and that came on the heels of Carol Quigley's expose in the mid-century. And they could reveal all this. Two things they didn't want you to do was to look at the esoteric worldview of the bankers. Number one, they weren't supposed to do that. And number two, they would consistently and always conflate free enterprise with capitalism, which I've argued are not the same thing. Capitalism is necessarily monopolistic capitalism. It is a mode of oligarchical organization. Free enterprise, beautiful. Okay, their publication, The New American, still is one of the best sources of information on this conspiracy. But it's controlled opposition. They're able to steer the blame and make sure no real resistance ever develops. Or as Lenin would say, the best way to control the opposition is to be the opposite. So this is why I want to put on the table the spiritual dimensions of what's at stake in terms of events rolling out in the world today, for those that have ears to hear. Just wanted to put it out on the table within the parameters of what could be a political science course if the university system would allow such a course.
So that clip said most of what I want to say in order just to set up and situate, contextualize all the chaos and drama that's going on and all the theorizing and the tensions. So within all these tensions, which I would argue are a type of chaos magic, there's an attempt here to deceive. And as Plato would say, whatever deceives you enchants you. And that definition would be creates a type of demonic ontology within you, or I call them egregores or mind demons. And so once we connect with these, and that's why I think it is important for me to put this out sooner rather than later, to have you thinking about this. And there are multiple theories spinning around. The one I'm going to say is, first of all, just look at the preponderance of evidence and even look at the clear evidence or the beyond the reasonable doubt evidence. And I think one would have to sort of stand back, deliberate, and not attach themselves to, I think, a lot of the mass formation psychology, psychosis that's frankly going on in the world. Part of this with the kind of Kabbalistic project is preparing our minds for a messianic age and getting a messianic archetype going on inside of our minds. And we've been prepared over the last 25 years with so many events, and more recently with events where we look the other way, thinking that spiritually it's okay to do that. We do that in the TV, alternative, the Catholic influencers. Look the other way. We're going to kind of pick our own battlegrounds of moral, of the moral field where we want to pitch our stake. And I think it's really setting us up for something like this to be quite pliable. As far as events like this, please think about what's happened over the last 4 years and the magnitude of what was pulled off. Something that could not even be isolated in a laboratory supposedly had all this. Now, I'm not saying I know exactly what happened. That's not what you do in court. I don't have to say exactly what happened. I just said there's way too much evidence to attach yourself to a conclusion in any one of these cases. Many of these schools where we come and learn together and there's young people, those situations, when they happen, nobody dares come out and challenge the narrative so it mimetically sticks. Even when the facts are sort of questioned down the road, it's there. It's the narrative. And we're not beholden to attach ourselves to any of these narratives, spiritually speaking. So I'm just saying, really detach yourself. I will leave more of my conclusions over on locals, but I think this was a very high level event that took on, and I would go much further than the alternative media is. And in a sense, it was prefigured in order to get the reaction that we're seeing around us, that this was a supernatural thing that happened. We forget about the past and we attach ourselves to the supernatural, or what people are claiming is the supernatural, but I'd actually suggest it's the ethereal that we're attaching ourselves to. So these techniques are tried and true. They're centuries old. They've been fine-tuned very well, and just about we've seen it. We have seen it. If you're thinking about it, I know some people are new to these ideas, but what I'm saying is not risky. I'm telling you, get back to reality, which I have argued is the traditional Catholic social order. This is one more movement to remove us from that order and into an artificial reality in preparation for a new age. So I'm going to wind that down for today. And I can keep talking about this from time to time, even as new evidence comes in. That's my basic stance on it, fitting it into this historical trajectory, getting us out of the immediate drama and finding a vantage point just to say, I'm not sure, but things ain't adding up at the very least. So I hope you all are doing well, and I'll be back with you very soon. This has been Dr. Deep State.